Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for tuning in. Tonight, we're going to have a battle royale between my three favorite bands of the 1990s, that being the Goo Goo Dolls, the Foo Fighters, and Collective Soul. The way that this works is I'm going to pit each band's first album up against each other, and then we will choose a winner, which one I think is the best album, all the way up until their most recent albums. Foo Fighters and Collective Soul have the same number of studio albums, that being 11. The Goo Goo Dolls actually have 13, but I'm not going to count their two 80s albums, the self-titled and Jed. I'm not going to count those albums. They're sort of the oddball albums in the collection anyway. So we're going to start the Goo Goo Dolls with Hold Me Up, because I think that is kind of a sort of a reasonable place to start with the Goo Goo Dolls, since those first two are just really sort of outliers in their catalog anyway. So that makes it an even 11 for all three bands. Now, in the event of a tiebreaker, should two bands wind up with the same amount of albums at the end, we will take the winning albums from those two bands and battle them and determine a winner that way. So this is just kind of a fun little idea, fun little game that I come up with in my head the other day. So we're going to see how this works out. And of course, this is just my opinion. Should you disagree, if you happen to be a fan of these three bands, then let me know in the comments below how you would, what albums you would choose. So here we go. Starting with the first albums from the group, we have Hold Me Up from the Goo Goo Dolls, Hints, Allegations, and Things Left Unsaid from Collective Soul, and the Foo Fighters' self-titled debut album. All three of these albums are pretty darn good in my opinion, but I think the clear winner for me is the Foo Fighters' debut. This is a super strong debut. It's one of my favorite debut albums of the 90s. Tons of great Foo Fighter classics on here. As good as these two albums are, I think this one outshines it. So the Foo Fighters win round number 1. Alright. Next up, we have the sophomore albums. We have Goo Goo Dolls, Superstar Car Wash, Collective Soul 95, and The Color and the Shape from the Foo Fighters. Man, all three of these albums are really good. These two albums are home to some of these two bands' biggest hits, such as World I Know, December, Gel, Where the River Flows. This one, of course, has Monkey Wrench, My Hero, and Everlong. This one has a couple of semi-decent hits. It would be another album until the Goo Goo Dolls really broke through onto the radio. But this one does have We Are the Normal on it. So, which of these albums do I think is the best? It probably honestly comes down to these two. So nothing against Superstar Car Wash. That's a fine album. But between Color and the Shape and Collective Soul 95, I think all the way through, this is the stronger album, Collective Soul 95. That's tough, though, because these are both great albums. I think this one sort of tails off for me at the end. Collection of Goods being my least favorite track on here, and then the Album Closer Reunion kind of being like my second least favorite track. This one, I think the hits sort of outshine a lot of the album tracks. Those are some other good stuff on here, like My Poor Brain and Wind Up and See You, Enough Space, New Way Home. There's good songs on here, but I think the hits really outshine this one. I think the album tracks hold their own on this one compared to the hits, so I'm going to give the edge to Collective Soul 95. Next up are the third albums. We have Goo Goo Dolls, A Boy Named Goo, Foo Fighters, There's Nothing Left to Lose, and Collective Soul, Discipline Breakdown. Three great albums again, but anybody who has watched my channel long enough, you've probably heard me say my favorite album of all time is There's Nothing Left to Lose. And that hurts because this is my favorite Goo Goo Dolls album. But I got to go with my favorite album of all time, There's Nothing Left to Lose. And then Discipline Breakdown, another great album that's sort of getting outshined in this round. So Foo Fighters wins again. Next up, we have round number 4. We've got Dosage from Collective Soul, Dizzy Up the Girl from the Goo Goo Dolls, and One by One from the Foo Fighters. Now, these two albums, this is the Goo Goo Dolls' best-known album for good reason. A lot of big hits on here. It's a fantastic album. This one, great Collective Soul album. Has songs like Tremble for My Beloved, Heavy, Run. May not be hits that are quite as well known as those on the 95 album, but great songs nonetheless, and just a super album from start to finish. And then you got this one. I think the really the underrated Foo Fighters album, in my opinion. This one's got a lot of great songs as well, a lot of classics, a lot of cool deep cuts. I think this one kind of gets overhated sometimes. But who's going to win this round? We got Dosage, we got Dizzy, we got One by One. Well, it's not going to be One by One. As much as I would come to the defense of that album, I think these two outshine it. So, head to head, Dosage versus Dizzy Up the Girl. Gosh. That one's rough, man. I love both these albums, but I have to give it to the Goo Goo Dolls this time. Dizzy Up the Girl is going to edge out Dosage just by a hair. Alright, next up is round number 5. We've got Blender from Collective Soul. We've got Gutter Flower from the Goo Goo Dolls. And In Your Honor from the Foo Fighters. Again, all these albums are really, really good. This one, I think, is chock full of filler, along with some really, really awesome cuts. I think both the rock disc and the acoustic disc have some really great standout songs, but they're sort of mixed in with some filler on both discs as well. This was a pretty solid follow-up to Dizzy Up the Girl. Some great Goo Goo Doll classics on here. Hits like Big Machine, Sympathy, and Here Is Gone. Some killer deep cuts as well. In my opinion, one of the real unsung heroes of Collective Soul's discography. I think this is a great album, Blender. Some fans love it, some fans hate it. I love it. And Blender is sort of like co-favorite Collective Soul albums with me. It's between Blender and Afterwards for my favorite Collective Soul album. I gotta give this round to Collective Soul. Versus Gutter Flower, I just think the strength of Blender all the way through. Yeah, I gotta give this one to Collective Soul. So Collective Soul wins round number 5. Next up, we have round 6. We've got Youth from Collective Soul. We've got Let Love In from the Goo Goo Dolls. And we've got Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace from the Foo Fighters. Again, 3 albums that I like. The first one that I can eliminate, though, is Youth. I think it's a good album, but it is one of my least favorite from Collective Soul. And I think does get out, or I think is outshined by these two, Let Love In and Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace. Both albums I love, but this one to me is got to go to Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace. My second favorite Foo Fighters album. Pretty much, this is what my senior year of high school sounded like on CD. So I gotta give it to this one. As great as Let Love In is as well. Round 6 goes to the Foo Fighters. Round 7. We've got Afterward from Collective Soul. We've got Wasting Light from the Foo Fighters. We've got Something for the Rest of Us from the Goo Goo Dolls. Alright. I said that Afterwards was sort of co-favorite albums with Blender for me, and that's going to get it the win in this round. Collective Soul's Afterwards is probably one of my favorite albums of all time. I would imagine it's in my top 10 somewhere. If it's not, it's just outside of it. Even though I like this album quite a bit, this one's good. Not really one of my favorites, though. I don't really know that these are top 10 to top 20 favorite albums all time for me. So Afterwards has to take this round. Alright, round number 8. We've got Collective Soul's self-titled from 2009. We've got Sonic Highways. And we've got Magnetic. Alright. We're getting to a point now where I no longer feel like I'm saying all these albums are super great. I'm not a huge Magnetic fan. There's a couple tracks on here that I really love, but I'm not a huge fan of this album overall. So that one's going to be eliminated. It comes down to these two. Neither one of these would rank too high on my list for each band, though I think both albums are still decent, still solid. This one, a concept album that I think could have been better. I think there's a really interesting ideas going on here with the musical roadmap of America. I kind of like what they were going for. I just don't think they quite nailed it, especially in the lyric department. It just doesn't really tell a story, in my opinion. And you got this one, decent album. It's got Welcome All Again, which is a song that really hooked me into Collective Soul. But otherwise, it's got decent songs, but nothing else that would be like top shelf Collective Soul for me. So which one would I go to? Which one, if I could only have one or the other? I think Sonic Highway is actually going to win that one. The Sonic Highway is going to win another one for the Foo Fighters. And now I have not counted these yet, but I've only got one Goo Goo Doll album that's won so far. So it's not looking good for the Goo Goo Dolls, which kind of surprises me that they're not more into this. I thought that I didn't think that Collective Soul and Foo Fighters were going to dominate it quite like this. All right, so we're at round number 9. We've got See What You Started by Continuing, Concrete and Gold, and Boxes. So, my least favorite Foo Fighters album. This one's not going to win, so we can eliminate that one. So it comes down to this one versus this one. This one, I'm not a fan of the production. It's just got it's a really poppy, modern, mid-2010s Goo Goo Dolls album. I think Magnetic, the band, the Goo Goo Dolls have been a pop band for a long time, but on Magnetic, I think they really started to shred any remnants of the rock in their sound. And on this one, it's really not even there anymore. It's just a pure pop album. Some of these songs are sort of not very good, like Flood and So Alive, tracks I just don't like at all. However, Johnny Resnick and Robbie Takak, two of my favorite songwriters, even if their musical direction is not going the way that I wished it would, they still managed to give me some great songs like Over and Over. Soul in the Machine is fantastic. I like Boxes quite a bit. I like Lucky One. I don't know why, but I kind of dig that one. Always have. Prayer in My Pocket. So there's definitely some good songs on here, but it's a hit and miss album. So is this one. But I think this one's a more rock and roll album, and that to me is a little bit more up my alley. So even though both of these are sort of hit and miss albums, I'm going to give it to Collective Soul. Sorry, Goo Goo Dolls. I'm trying to get you one here. But I just got to be honest. All right, next up, round 10, we have the one album here that I don't own, which is Miracle Pill from the Goo Goo Dolls. We have an album that came out the same year, Blood from Collective Soul, and we have Medicine at Midnight from the Foo Fighters. So, Blood is almost like co-least favorite albums with Youth for me. It's a good album. I don't think it's it's not bad by any means. There's a few songs on here that I just never got that into. There's some songs on here I really dig. It's a little bit of a hit and miss album, but overall, it's one of my lesser favorites from Collective Soul. I do think this is a pretty good step up from the previous album, Concrete and Gold. However, is it quite as good as the Foo Fighter classics? Not quite, but I still think this is a fun album. Between the two, if I could only have one, which one would it be? Medicine at Midnight. I think Medicine at Midnight is just a really fun album. There's just too many on this one I'm not that into. So I'm going to take Medicine at Midnight. That brings us to the last round. The most recent album from all these bands. Chaos and Bloom from the Goo Goo Dolls. Vibrating from Collective Soul. And But Here We Are from the Foo Fighters. I love all three of these. So we're finally getting back to a really, really great crop of albums here. All three of these would rank actually fairly high on my respective list for these bands. In my opinion, all three of these albums are the best albums that these bands have put out in at least a decade. This one, everything that's been released within a decade of this would be Sonic Highway, Concrete and Gold, and Medicine at Midnight. I think this one smokes all three of them. This one, everything released within a decade of this album would be Magnetic, Miracle Pill, and Boxes. I think this one smokes all three of them. And I think this one is better than both Blood and See What You Started from Continuing, the only two albums that were released within a decade of this album. I think this is the best one. So, nice comeback albums for each group. And this is so tough, man. Because I love all three of these. But I think maybe it's just because I had the lowest expectations. Chaos and Bloom blew me away when it came out. It came out the same day that Vibrating came out. And I listened to Vibrating first, and I loved it. And then I went and listened to this one, and I just could not believe this really feels like the return to form from the Goo Goo Dolls. They kind of put a little bit of rock back into their sound. It kind of sounds like they're no longer trying to be popular or hip or cool or whatever. They just sort of went back to doing what the Goo Goo Dolls do best, and it comes across because this album is amazing. This one is too. This was supposed to be, Blood was supposed to be a double album at one point, and this was the batch of songs, I guess, that would have been on the second part of that. In my opinion, it's the better batch of songs, but maybe I'm the only one who thinks that. And of course, this one, after all the tragedies that took place within the band over the last year before this album came out, the death of Taylor Hawkins and Virginia Grawl, this is definitely a album of grief, but also an album of sort of overcoming those tragedies. It's tough for me to pick a winner because I love all three of these, but if there was just one, if I could only have one of these, Chaos and Bloom is the one that speaks to me the most. Love these two to death, but I'm going to give this last round to the Goo Goo Dolls. So, that wraps up the Battle Royale. Let's tally up the winners. Unfortunately, the Goo Goo Dolls are not going to win because they've only got two albums that won. These two, Chaos and Bloom and Dizzy Up the Girl. So now it's down to Foo Fighters versus Collective Soul. So let's count this out. All right, Foo Fighters have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Collective Soul has 4. That means the winner of the 90s Battle Royale is the Foo Fighters. All right. So that's, in a way, that's actually kind of surprising because even though I love all three of these bands, if you happen to check out my 30 favorite bands video that I posted just before Christmas last year, I actually ranked Foo Fighters my third favorite of the three. I think, did I have them all in a row, or I had them all really close to one another? It was, I had Goo Goo Dolls, then Collective Soul, then Foo Fighters. I think they were either all three in a row, or they were like 3 out of 4 or 5 on my list somewhere. But Foo Fighters is going to win the tournament. So in the comments below, if you happen to be a fan of these three groups, let me know who would win your Battle Royale. If you like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you next time.